Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to give you a full technical preview of the Austrian Grand Prix, the first race of 2020. We're going to head out onto the circuit now in the McLaren, of course, and this is my out lap, or the installation lap, which is the first thing that anybody will be doing on Friday morning. We hear it all the time in the commentary. The installation lap is really the first opportunity for the teams and drivers just to get the car rolling on a circuit. For many of them, it'll have had in fact for almost all of them, it will have had a full rebuild, many updates to many cars. It'll be the first time that lots of components will run on a circuit, and really it's an opportunity to make sure the driver's comfortable in the car, make sure there's nothing rubbing on his seat, make sure his belts are good, his pedal settings are all correct, but also then when they get the car back to check out that nothing's rubbing, things like brake ducts not rubbing on suspension or tyres, make sure there's no leaks from any of the systems on board the car. And they'll also do various system checks on that installation lap as well. So you hear the engineer talking to the driver, telling him to go through various modes on the steering wheel. They may do some aero runs at this point because there's nothing in terms of tyre temperature, there's nothing in terms of performance runs they can do at this point. So they may do some constant speed runs just to get some basic aero data from the car and calibrate all the sensors as well. So all of that is going on over the course of what seems like a really dull and slow installation lap. Okay, here we go then. Coming out the final corner, you've got to be really wary of those curves on the exit, which is a feature of this circuit all the way around. Flat out down the straight then, DRS wide open, and I'm going to stop it here because look at what faces you coming into that first corner. Just look how uphill we are into that braking zone, and the car is flat out along there, really flat out with DRS open, so maximum speeds, so you can leave your braking really quite late as you approach this turn one. But it's really critical to get that right, of course. You can use the aero loading on the car to help with braking. You can use the gravity that you're fighting against going uphill, of course, and that weight transfer when you hit the brakes all onto that front axle gives you extra loading on the front end, which will help prevent brakes from locking. But what you have to do is be very careful about picking out your braking point and getting through this corner cleanly, because the exit is super critical. Can't take too much curb on the apex or the exit there because it'll unsettle the car. But look what's ahead of us now is one of the longest straights, even though it's not actually straight. Another DRS zone as well, flat out all the way up this hill. All the way through here then you're flat with DRS open. The first sector ends somewhere around here, what is turn 2, and then let's stop it again as we head towards turn 3, which is another really uphill braking zone, the steepest and the highest part of the circuit. And actually, if you look from the driver's position right now, you can't even really see your apex point at this stage. You're looking for something that only will come into view as you really approach the corner and get the car slowed down to minimal speed from what was maximum speed on the approach. There you can see the apex just come into view now, so you've got to get the car slowed all the way down to second gear, turn it in. You've got to just clip that curb, but again it's one of those that you cannot go too heavy on. You've got to treat it with some respect. Same with the exit, because you bump onto that curb there as you're trying to get the power down, you really can spit the rear end out and end up on that wall over on the right hand side. Now again, look what's ahead of us, a blind crest into another DRS zone, another flat out part of the circuit. This is incredibly high. The views from up here are amazing. I went around this circuit last year or the year before last on the electric skateboard, and whilst it only just about made it to the top of that incredibly steep climb into turn 3 there, on the way out of that and on the way downhill from here, it's all downhill. It's incredibly fast from here on in. So here we go. Gently on the power, but as early as you can. Again, DRS wide open, and this is flat out again all the way through this section. Down the hill, looking for your braking point again. I've locked them up, but you shouldn't be able to do that in real life. Using the inside curve a tiny bit, but what you can do here is use the exit curve a lot more because it's a much flatter curve on that part to give you a slingshot onto this really sweeping fast part of the circuit here. The fastest corners on the circuit coming up here. Now just look what's happening here. This is the first corner that we've got that's a left-hander, and the problem with this for Formula 1 teams and drivers is that whilst we've been building up tyre temperature all the way around the lap, particularly on the right hand side on the left-hand side of the car with all the right-hand turns, we now come into the two fastest corners on the circuit, where we're going to load up the right-hand side of the car, the right-hand tyres, which, relatively speaking, are much cooler and therefore have much less grip. It's a real balancing act, this one, to judge the grip levels you're going to have on these left-hand turns that really are so fast through here. This is about bravery, turning into this corner, because you really feel like you shouldn't be going this quickly, but the car tends to hold on and hold on. The circuit opens up for you a little bit, again through here, on the power, pretty much all the way through that corner, using the exit curve a little bit. That's absolutely fine, it's fairly low and flat, and then flat out again over another crest where we drop downhill massively. This is a fast corner here, turn 9. You've got to keep the speeds up hugely, but watch that apex, that exit curve again. Same on the last corner, turn 10. The exit curve can really unsettle the car. When you want to get back launched on the power, it can spit you off onto the inside wall. But here we go again with DRS wide open for another flat out lap of this great circuit. I love it. It's a great circuit. It's a short lap, but there's a lot going on in there. And because it's quite a compact and short lap, it does have a couple of effects. One is that there just simply isn't the space on the circuit to stretch out the performance differences between the three different tyre compounds, the C2, C3 and C4. Exactly the same nominations that were brought last year, and in fact exactly the same tyres, let's not forget, that have carried over from 2019 into 2020. So teams and drivers have a fairly good understanding of which tyres do what around this circuit. But the differential in performance is minimised around this place simply because the lap's so short. And the other big impact that short circuit has is when it comes to qualifying on Saturday. Finding a gap, finding a space on the circuit to get yourself a nice clear run. That's almost more important than looking for the optimum time, the optimum window within that qualifying section that you're in. It's much more about getting the clean lap, because that can bring you more advantage when it comes to lap time. Similarly on Sunday, because of the short lap and the fact that if you do drop back because of a slightly alternate pit stop strategy, you will have to fight your way through a really compact and compressed field, which you don't really want to have to do in modern Formula One. So the short circuit has an impact on a number of things, not just the way that the teams and the drivers operate the cars, but also when it comes to strategy as well. It's what the teams would call a longitudinally limited circuit, as opposed to a laterally limited circuit, which many others are, where you're limited by the cornering grip that your car might have. How quickly are the tyres on one side of the car going to give up through some of the long corners or the long duration corners or the multiple corners coming thick and fast. At this particular circuit, it's much more about longitudinal forces, braking and acceleration. How good is your car at coping and dealing with those forces? How stable is it under braking? We've got some really fast straights into slow corners around this place. If you haven't got a car that's got great stability under braking, you end up losing traction, you end up missing your turn in, and consequently you miss the exit onto what is often a next long straight around this place. Acceleration as well, because you're coming out of a lot of these slow corners onto fast straights, getting the power down through the rear wheels is also crucially important. That's about how the power delivery comes in from the power unit, but it's also about how your chassis dynamics transfer weight as you get the power down from the front to the rear of the car, putting force onto those rear tyres to limit the braking traction that you might otherwise get. So there's so much going on in terms of the dynamics, the chassis dynamics, the suspension dynamics, as well as the actual power delivery when the driver puts his right foot down, that can really affect the launch onto the straight. And if you don't get that right, by the time you get to the end of that really long straight, your VMAX or your maximum speed is lower than it should be, and you can easily get swallowed up by other cars. The other thing that this really picturesque circuit can be is really quite brutal at times. It can destroy your car over these really high and aggressive curbs if you don't treat them with the respect that they command. We've seen suspension fall apart around here as drivers have taken a little bit too much on the exit at times. A driver wants to push his car to the absolute limit to gain lap time. The engineers and the team are really mindful of the fact that the loads going through those cars and that suspension, if you do get out onto these curbs, can destroy it. They can wreck your qualifying session, they can wreck your race. And at a time when lots of these cars are brand new with brand new upgrades, not even knowing how many races we've got coming, the spares limitation that some teams might be under could prove really quite disastrous if you go through too many components in the first weekend. Personally, I love this place. I love going there. It's a great circuit to drive, even on the simulator. It may be a short lap, but it's still really quite hard to get right. There are so many corners that can make such a difference with just minor, tiny details, and that's exactly the same in real life. 10 corners, but they all count for an awful lot of this circuit. I love it.